So if I can ask someone to press the left button, that's it. There you go. Thank you.
Back to the old days.
Just for today. Okay. Share. Yeah. So we just want to take a look at the just going to take a look at the Shulchan Aruch today. Let me just wait until it's officially 6:10. So just as a reminder, what did we see yesterday? We saw the commentary on the Siddur, which, by the way, is a wonderful study. If you're ever looking for a good, let's say you wanted to have a chavrusa on studying what's called iyun tefillah, just studying the structure of the Siddur, why the words are the way they are, why Chazal structured the tefillah the way they did. Learning the Abu Dirham is a great sefer. It's really a great sefer, and I highly recommend it. I actually had a chavrusa many years ago with someone. Before the days of Zoom, we studied by phone, and we had a chavrusa in the Abu Dirham. It was very enriching. Okay, so it's a worthwhile study unto its own. Just being able to get clarity on why we say what we say and how the rabbis structured the siddur. It's such an important thing, and we don't study it enough. Abu Dirham. It's like, it looks like the word Avraham, but it has an extra vav and an extra daled. Abu Dirham. It's an Arabic name. Rabbi David Abu Dirham. Okay. All right. So in any event, let's take a look at Siman Reish Lamed Tes in the Shulchan Aruch, and we'll look at the Mishnah Berurah. Din Kriya Shema al mitasa, the law of Kriya Shema before you go to bed. Korei al mitato parsha rishona shel Shema. So you read the first paragraph of Shema while you're in bed. And you say the bracha of Hamapil. And so we'll take a look. We'll just do the whole thing. I only have this one page. The Yikra Kriya Shema Samach Lemitaso. And you should recite Kriya Shema nearby your bed, which means not nearby spatially, but nearby, as we'll see in just a moment, right before you go to sleep. Ve'ein ochlim v'lo shosim v'lo medabrim achar kriya shema sha'al mitaso. You're not supposed to eat or drink or speak after kriya shema. Ela yishan miyad, but rather you should sleep immediately. Shenemar imru v'ilvavchem al mishkavchem. When you speak in your hearts, which is, we learned yesterday, is the pasuk, takef. You're right, and you should create an adjacency between Shema and sleep. Imru v'ilvavchem, you'll say al livavecha, meaning the Shema, al mishkavchem, on your beds, and then v'domu sela, and then be silent. And he's quoting the Kolbo and the Rokeach and Rabbeinu Yerucham. So then what do you do? Actually, I should have copied the second page. V'imkara kriya shema v'lo yuchal lishan miyad, and if you recited kriya shema and you're not able to fall asleep, all of a sudden you discover you have insomnia. So let me just bring up what the rest of the text is. Sorry about that. I forgot that it just continues on the other side of the page. So I'll just bring up the digital version. He says, so then Choser v'korei kama pa'amim ze achar ze. So then you can recite it multiple times, one after the other. just like we saw that Rav Yaakov Gerona did it, okay? Ad sheyishtaka b'sheina, until you fall into, that you sink into sleep. That's really literally what it means. V'sheyeh kriyasa samoch l'sheinos, so that your recital will be adjacent to your sleep. Ve'ein mevorchem al kriyas shema shel arvis, you don't make any special bracha on this kriyas shema like you do at Ma'ariv. And then the rest of the siman deals with other psukim that are customary to recite when you're saying Kriya Shema al Amita. And all right, so we'll take a look at the Mishnah Berurah now. We'll take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, and we'll use this text, this printing, because I wanted you to see something in the margin notes. Okay, so first of all, the Mishnah Berurah holds you only have to say the first paragraph of the Shema. He says, however, are you able to see this, or is this a little bit too small? Should I? This is your eye test, huh? Is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay. V'im hispalal arvis miba'od yom. Let's say you davened Ma'ariv while it was still daytime, like so many of us do this time of year when we go to a plag minyan. So then, you know how the Gabbai announces, don't forget to recite Kriya Shema after 8:57, whatever Zman Kriya Shema is, and count Sfira. Today's the 21st day of the Omer, right? In case anyone forgot. By the way, these apps that you have today, there's no excuse. There's no excuse to forget counting. It comes up on your phone, and you remember to count Sfira. It's the most wonderful, isn't technology grand? Okay. Sarach likros kol parshios. Then you have to recite the entirety of Kriya Shema, the three parshios, because you weren't Yotze Kriya Shema before. And that's what we had seen also, is that the minhag in the times of the Yerushalmi also was to recite Kriya Shema before it was nighttime. And we said it had to do with safety issues. People didn't want to be outside at night. Okay. V'yechavin lotzeis bahem yedei hamitzvah saseh shel kriya shema v'gam hamitzvah shel zichures yitzias Mitzrayim. And your intent should be, just like when you recite Kriya Shema in the morning, to fulfill the biblical commandment of v'shrach b'cho v'kumecha, that I have a mitzvah to remember, to accept the yoke of heaven upon myself with the recital of Shema, both in the evening and in the morning. And I also have the mitzvah of remembering the Exodus at night, just as I do during the day. V'tov lomar tamid kol kriya shema shehi ramach tevos b'tzeiruf kel melech ne'aman lishmor ramach evarav. And the Mishnah Berurah says, he says, you know something? Even if you were Yotze Kriya Shema already, it's a good idea, not mandatory, but it's a good idea to say all three paragraphs of Kriya Shema before you go to bed, because how many words are there in the three paragraphs of the Shema? 245. And when you add the three words Kel Melech Ne'eman as a preface to Kriya Shema, you have a total of 248. That corresponds to the number of limbs in a person's body. And therefore, the Kriya Shema will act as a protector. Remember, you get this idea of protection again. Because again, people would go to bed at night in the ancient and medieval world. You don't know. If you're going to wake up. The house may burn down. Animals may come in. Rats may start gnawing at you. No, I'm serious. You have no idea what's going to happen in the middle of the night. You may get a bunch of non-Gentiles, angry Gentiles at your doorstep. Who knows what's going to happen? So this idea of needing protection was a big thing. Like, you really were praying for your life. The reason why prayer had so much more power in the earlier days is because people were living in fear. Just to grasp the idea that thank God we don't have to live in fear anymore, in constant tension and constant anxiety. Now in Eretz Yisrael with the bombings, that was more like everyday life in Europe and when these halachas are being written. All right, so and then you say the bracha of Hamapil. So he says, Milashana Shulchan Aruch Mashma de Birkas Hamapil Omer Achar Kriyashma Kedei Shetei HaBracha Smucha Lashena. It seems from this language that you say Hamapil after you recite Kriyashma, because like like we saw in the Abu Dirham yesterday, you want to say the very last words of that bracha right before you fall asleep. Umashukari achar kach yoshev b'seiser v'inach kaven dahavi mishum shmira lo havi hefsek. He says, and the fact that then the Shulchan Aruch says you say additional psukim after Hamapil is not considered a hefsek because those are also part of the protective measures that you take before you go to bed, which is interesting because we saw in the Yerushalmi yesterday that that's a machlokes, whether the bracha of emes v'yatziv, what the Gemara had called emes v'yatziv, which is the bracha after Shema, which we substitute with Hamapil, has to dafka be immediately adjacent to sleep, or whether you could say additional psukim as well. He says, V'yesh medaktikim levarech Hamapil basof achar kol hapsukim. And he says, for that reason, there are some people, despite the way it's printed in the Siddur, they save Hamapil for the very end. And they don't say the bracha of Hamapil until they mamish go to bed. V'yesh meha achronim sheyiskimu sheyivarech birkas Hamapil kodem v'achar kach kriyashma v'yes psuki derachmi k'moshe nitpas b'sidurim. He says there are others who hold that first you say Hamapil, then you say Kriyashma, and then you say the other psukim that are there for Shmira. Venira, he says, but therefore there are many different minhagim. De lamaisa yisnaig ha'adam kemotivo. He says you should do what your nature tells you to do. Now, that's a very strange language. Dahainu imtivo leheiradein be'emtza kriyashma. That means we mean as follows. You're in bed, got your pajamas on, it's been a long day. You're starting to recite Kriya but you know that 9 out of 10 times you end up dozing off in the middle of Kriya So if that's your nature, the imtivo le'iradim be'emsa Kriya tov yoter shiyaktem birkas hamapil ma de'efsher. Then it's better to say hamapil earlier because it's a bracha. You don't want to miss out on the bracha. But he says v'im ein tivo lazeh tov yoter la'acher birkas hamapil ad lebasof. But if you know that you're going to stay awake and like you're really like you're in the zone, it's better to keep hamapil at the end. So already what you're seeing in this kind of language is that even the Mishnah Berurah acknowledges that we're not robots. When it comes to legislating how I'm supposed to fall asleep at night, it's not easy in the poskim to carefully regiment every single step of how you're supposed to fall asleep. I mean, I can tell you what the order of tefillah is when you're davening shacharis, but to tell you what the order of tefillah is when you're already in bed, you're lying down on your side, and you're about to fall asleep, Mishnah Berurah says, I have to be realistic. There are many people who at this point can barely keep their eyes open. So in that case, you know what? Say Hamapil, say Shema, or say Shema and Hamapil, and whatever you got left in you, you can say until you doze off. But if you're still wide awake, then save Hamapil for the very end. Okay. All right, next, Samuch lemitaso. You should say it nearby your bed, and here maybe it means spatially nearby your bed. Velo yikra kriya shma kishi yikanes lishan. He says it's better not to recite kriya shma when you're already entering sleep. Ela kishiroa shahashena ba'alav, but rather when you see that you're starting to become drowsy, that's a good time to recite it. Because again, we're concerned you may fall asleep in the middle of the process. Avol b'knesses hagdola kosav sheyesh likros miyad, shema tachtefenu sheina acher kach v'lo yikra. And the Knesset Hagdola takes a different approach. He says, say it as soon as it's time to go to bed, even if you're not tired yet. He says, why? Because we're worried that if you wait until you're drowsy, you're going to end up mumbling the words and you won't end up saying it properly. Ve'ein lachosh mishum hefsek ela kishos davar acher bintime. And even if you recite it and there's a big hefsek in the between your recital and falling asleep, according to that opinion, it's okay. It's not a big deal because you're not doing anything. He says the fact that you're sitting and doing nothing in your home is not called a hefsek. I wonder what he would say if watching TV or scrolling your phone, would that be considered a hefsek or not? We have no idea because in the ancient world,
Hefsek is talking.
yeah, well, Hefsek is talking, but what if you're engrossed in watching a movie and you're not talking, but can you say that there's no Hefsek between your blessings of Kriya Shema and you're falling asleep? Like, what if you were to watch a movie from the Tilas Yadayim until you make Hamotzi? Okay, is that okay? Technically, you didn't have a Hefsek, you didn't talk, but you've certainly removed your thoughts from washing your hands
But
to
also
make.
you're not supposed to wait so long. You're supposed to make the bracha right away.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the same thing. Well, we learned that there are three takeoffs. There are three things that you're supposed to go straight from one to the other. And two of them were takeoff the Kriya Shema Shena or takeoff the Shena Kriya Shema. Immediately before you fall asleep, you're supposed to recite the Shema. And immediately before you make Hamotzi, you're supposed to do Netilas Yadayim. That's what we learned yesterday. Okay, so anyway.
Well, I don't know if we'll get to this or not, but if let's say you come home late at night and your wife's sleeping in the room that's all dark, can you go into another room to say that, not to disturb her?
Sure.
I thought it had to be a mita.
It's supposed to be nearby your bed, but again, like what you see from the Knesset Hagdola is that there's latitude in this law. There's plenty of latitude. Don't feel that this is so carefully choreographed that you can't deviate from the script at all, is essentially what you're seeing from this halacha.
Take that, not take from other stuff. You're making it that it is.
Well, I'm going to show you from other commentaries.
And then, how do we know when to be mocked and when not to be mocked from this? That's
Yeah,
a very
you're right.
Scary.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. Look, I can't tell you with absolute certainty, but you develop a sense after a period of time that when you're reading these halachas and you see that there's such a diversity of opinion as how a person should comport himself, you understand because there are certain life is messy. There are certain aspects of life that can be carefully halachically regimented. How I'm supposed to have my meal. I know how about washing. I know about making hamotzi. I know how to say birkas hamazon. It's all printed and there's no ambiguity, right? But when it comes to certain aspects of waking up in the morning and going to bed at night, there are so many different factors that have to be taken into consideration. Do I have to relieve myself? Is my wife interested in some intimacy? All of these are going to be playing a role in how I'm going to be waking up or going to bed. And you have to be able to understand that these are under optimal conditions when you're sleeping by yourself or your wife is already asleep and she doesn't need to talk. So then as soon as you finish Kriya Shema, shine, everything is closed, try to fall asleep. Okay? But what if your wife says, I need to talk to you? You're not going to believe what happened to me today. So you're going to say, right? No, of course not. So we'll see this in just a minute.
It happens naturally. It just goes.
In the middle of the.
Yeah.
My uphill.
You got to at least have those things, that you put on your eyelids that look like eyeballs that pretend you're awake. Okay. And then play a recording on your phone that says, Okay. All right. Achar Kriya Shema. Now, you're not supposed to eat or drink after you recite Kriya Shema or speak. V'im ta'ev lishtoso ledaber eze inyan nachutz. He says, if you desire to drink or to say something that's important, nira shemutar. It seems that that's okay. Ach yachzor v'yikra parsha Shema. But you should recite with the paragraph of Shema after this hefsek. Achenim kvar omer birkas hamakpil yizahir bazeh. But if you already said the brach of hamapil, he says that's a problem. Ki yafsik bein habracha lahashenim, because that's going to create a hefsek. So this is where it becomes problematic. And the Mishnah Berurah is very machmir. The Mishnah Berurah says, once you said hamapil, could be a hefsek, bracha levatala. What are you going to do? So really, once you said hamapil, you got to be very careful. You can't talk. But that's not human, right? The Mishnah Berurah was an angel. The Chafetz Chaim was an angel. So I could certainly see the Chafetz Chaim being very careful about this.
So when does the guy go to the wash?
Yeah, so what if you have to go to the washroom, right? So
Wake up, you're thirsty, like,
a lot of things could happen.
And is there a
right?
time frame of not talking? Is it after like a certain amount of time of sleep? Like, you wake up at 2:30.
Oh, so waking up in the middle of the night is addressed separately. And there's a way to there's a way to address that, but that's not what he's dealing with right now. Okay, and then he writes Yishan miyad, you should fall asleep right away. Ve'im tzarich l'shamesh mitato, and if you need to have intimacy with your wife, it's like if you need to, right? Right? It's like, all right, it's my conjugal duty, I got to do it. Listen, what? I have no choice, So yirchatz atzmo mehashichva zereshalav. So then, after you're finished, you should bathe yourself from the emission that is still on your body. The yitol yadav, wash your hands. The achar kach yikra, and then recite Kriya Shema. Ulefachos yomar birkas hamapilu shema achar hatashmish. And what you should certainly try to do is to say the brach of Hamapil and Shema after intimacy, not before. And again, so here's where, if we were just to see the Mishnah Berurah, I think a young man would be very disturbed and be very conflicted. Later editions, there's this commentary called Ish Matzliach. It's a commentary on the Mishnah Berurah, which brings other poskim as well.
Who is that?
You know what? I don't think I remember.
That's a good.
Ish Matzliach. It's printed. It's a commentary on the Mishnah Berurah. It was written, within the last 20, 30 years. Anyway, footnote number 7, where he says, once you've said Hamapil, that's it, no, nothing more. He says, Ulam b'shut yechavidas, pasak shimtoiv lishtos rashai levarech. He says, however, the Yechavidas disagrees. And he says that if you really, you're chalashing for something to drink, and you already lay down and you realize you're really thirsty, then you're allowed to drink and you make a bracha. You make a bracha shahakol, you make a borei nefashos, and also if you have to go to the bathroom. How many times does it happen to us where we think we're falling asleep and all of a sudden, I got a pish? So yivarech achar kach asher yotzar. So you say an asher yotzar afterwards. V'chein muter ledaber davar nachutz. And also, if you need to speak, you can speak even after hamapil. V'chein kasav bebirkei, not sure what that abbreviation is. Shemi'ikar hadin rashai ledaber divrei rishus achar hamapil. That really technically you are allowed to speak after hamapil. V'rakim kara kriya shema lo yedaber kedei sheyishan mitoch divrei Torah. He says, if you've already recited Shema, try to fall asleep so that your sleep will be entered into with words of Torah. Now, why is that important? It's not just important for Shmira, but it's going to influence how you dream and how you sleep, that you're entering into your sleep stage with words of Torah. Okay? Not like, you're not entering into sleep with Johnny Carson. You're entering into words of sleep or Jay Leno or the movies, right? You're entering into sleep with words of Torah. It changes the quality of your sleep.
Is that a fact?
I think so. Yeah, it certainly influences the way that you're going to dream at night.
I find the stuff that I'm busy with during the day is what comes up at night.
Yeah, the Gemara says that. The Gemara says that. The im hutzrach ledaber, and if you've already cited Shema and you need to speak, so when you're done, just say Shema one more time. No one says that you say the bracha a second time. There is an opinion that was brought down in one of the commentaries that there was one Rosh Yeshiva who didn't say Hamapil before he went to bed because he was constantly worried that he was going to have to speak afterwards. And he felt that it might be a bracha levatala. But that doesn't seem to be the prevailing opinion. And then also, when he talks about intimacy with your wife, he says, he says, you are allowed to be intimate with your wife even after you recited Kriya Shema, even after you said Hamapil. Vehevihu habal hakaf hachayim, siyem denira shahakol lefi mashu adam. And the Kaf HaChaim says it all depends on what kind of person you are, right? In other words, if you're so committed in your religious zeal, and you and your wife are willing to forego intimacy because you've already recited the bracha, okay, that's who you are. But then there are people who are more, they have a romantic relationship with their wives, which requires a little bit more spontaneity and living in the moment and not having to think about all of these things. So for those people, it's perfectly permissible for them to engage in intimacy even after they've recited Kriya Shema.
But do girls in seminary learn any of this so that they'll know not to talk to their husband?
Why are you hoping they do? There's a certain aspect of failure in that regard. Just a slight aside. And that is that if girls are not taught about, and boys, are not taught about the human aspect of relationships and are only taught about the halachic aspects of married life, then they're losing something. They're losing something really substantive. I remember learning that Rabbi Akiva Eger, his wife passed away, and he eulogized her. And he, in his eulogy, which is printed, he said he would spend hours speaking with his wife at night. And those were the most valuable times of his day. The great Rabbi Akiva Eger, the great Talmudist, he had such a close relationship with his wife. And no one knew about it, of course, because, you meet someone during the day as the great rabbi. You don't think about his friendship with his life companion. But that's what he wrote, and that's what he said publicly in his hesped. That's what we should be teaching the boys and the girls in the seminary, that life is not about whether you said Kriya Shema 5 minutes before you went to bed or not, but it is, did you take the time at the end of the day to have a meaningful conversation with your spouse? Or were you both scrolling through your phones and watching TV? And you never took the time to actually have a meaningful conversation. Those are the things that we should be encouraging our children and the young people to pursue. And it's not just for the young people, but it's for us as well. Okay, so again, these are aspects of halacha that are not so easily, pigeonholed into do this, do this, do this, do this.
So you can see from the Ish Matzliach that there's a
Whole
latitude.
It's all over the place. It's all over the place. It's not like
clear that you see that it's not.
It's really very difficult for each person to know exactly how to comport himself. You have the parameters, should recite Kriya Shema Lamita. Should try to fall asleep immediately afterwards. But life happens, okay? And don't get caught up in the fact, oh yeah, I already said Hamapil. I don't know if I can get up. I'm not sure if I can speak, right? Because then, then you're not living. Then you're okay. Okay. So with that in mind, let me just close this. We really, let me just see if there's any more. Oh, one other thing that the Mishnah Berurah does say, he says, the question is, should you be reciting it when you're lying down, or is it better to recite it before you lie down? In other words, should you be sitting or lying down when you recite Kriya Shema Lamita? So the Mishnah Berurah just says that it seems that lechatchila, it's better not to lie down and recite it while you're lying down, even if you're on your side. But then he quotes the Magen Avram. Davka kishakari zoha kriyishma l'shem chov v'kagon sheyispal arbis me'be'od yom v'tzarachat l'chavin l'kam mitzvahs aseh to kriyishma l'kach tzarach lizar b'chol prateha. He says it's only if you're reciting kriyishma lamita to fulfill your Ma'ariv duty, because you daven Ma'ariv early, then you should try to say it while you're seated and before you lie down. Avalim kvar kara bizmana v'karayata rak mishum kriyishma lamita mutter lechatchila likrosa b'shchiva. But if you already fulfilled the Kriya Shema, then it's no problem to recite the whole Shema while you're lying down, but you should be on your side. Okay, we'll